Welcome to the Americorps information session hosted by the Holden Center for Leadership and Community Engagement. We're really excited to share a lot of information about Americorps with you all today and hopefully give you a better understanding for all of the programs that are available through it. And we also will share a little bit of our experiences with it as well. I do want to make you all aware that we are recording today's webinar just so that other folks will have access to it afterwards. So if you'd like to turn your videos off, that's totally fine. And we do ask that everybody, which I think you all already are, but that you are muted just so that we can minimize any noise things. And then last logistical note, if you do have any questions, since we are doing this virtually, if you want to just, I would encourage you to just keep a list of questions that you might have. Hopefully we'll answer all of them throughout the slides, but we will have a Q&A portion towards the end, so we can always come back to that as well. So before we jump into actual Americorps stuff, I do want to introduce who we have here with us today. So I'm Hannah. I use she, her pronouns. I work as the coordinator at the Holden Center for Leadership and Community Engagement. And I'm gonna let everybody else introduce themselves really quickly as well, and you'll hear from them a little bit more in just a little bit. So Kate, it's all you.
Hey y'all, my name is Kate. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an academic and career advisor in Tyson Hall, specifically for media, arts and expression flight path, so majors that fall within there. And am I forgetting anything? I think that's it. Cool. I'm happy to be here.
Oops, sorry. Christina, if you want to go next.
Sure. My name is Christina Navina. I use she, her, hers. I also am an academic and career advisor in Tyson Hall. I work specifically with the Global Connections Flight Path. I'm just going to throw out there that my 4-year-old is here with me. His show may be ending soon, so he may make an appearance. I'll try to keep it on mute.
I guess I'm the last one up. My name is Victoria Binning. I'm the program coordinator for an Americorps program housed at the U of O called Resource Assistance for Rural Environments that I'll be talking about a little bit throughout the course of this presentation. But I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thank you all. So I also do want to acknowledge that we are 4 cis white women talking about service. And so that I don't think is a coincidence. I think definitely want to acknowledge that taking a year to serve definitely can be connected to enactment of some of our privileges, but it also is not that way for everybody. But we could spend a whole other webinar talking about white females in service and white saviorism, but that's not what we're here for today. But I did want to acknowledge that before we dive in. So with that being said, what is Americorps? So we'll start at the beginning. Americorps is an opportunity for folks of all ages and backgrounds to give their time and talent to get things done. So you'll hear that a lot throughout the presentation. That is like Americorps' chant or motto, I guess, that we get things done. Excuse me. So no matter what you're passionate about or where you're from, what you choose to serve or why, Americorps really provides a chance to contribute to the greater good in a sense. So each year, 75,000 individuals volunteer with Americorps, and they join a network of over 1 million civic-minded leaders. So there are thousands of opportunities to serve in Americorps, and we'll kind of go through some of them. Each have different time commitments and requirements and perks. So we're going to provide a little bit more information and context so that you're able to find the Americorps opportunity that is right for you. So many of these opportunities can change your life. I know that mine did. And you will really contribute to that lasting impact in a community that you serve. So your year of service, so Corps members can serve anywhere from 3 months to a year in either part-time or full-time positions. You are also able to serve more than one term. And those are some specifics that we can talk about later if you have questions about that. But so you can play a really vital role in tackling some of our nation's most pressing challenges. So you can either serve in your hometown, or you can choose from a variety of locations across the country where you can make a difference. You're able to immerse yourself in projects that respond to community needs and often are very specific to those communities. You'll serve hand in hand with the organizations that help to improve lives of people, and you, again, get to help create lasting change. So serving in this capacity also really helps you develop your leadership skills. It can really aid you in exploring a future career and also helps you develop real world skills that employers want. And you can also earn money for college, which is a great bonus. So these are just a few of the many, many partners of Americorps. I'm sure many of you have heard of some of them. So City Year, United Way, Habitat for Humanity are really popular ones. Americorps is such a wonderful opportunity because there are so many options. So many of the Americorps positions can work within these larger operations at the local level, and others work with very small nonprofits that are specific to an issue in a very specific area. So it's very varied. So this is just a glimpse at some of them. So Americorps is a network that connects you to nonprofit, faith-based, or public organizations that advance different causes. And so figuring out which option is right for you is kind of the first step. So hopefully these focus areas will help with that. So in education, you can be the one who greets a student each day at a school. You can mentor them. You can also help be a part of programs that keep them on track to graduate. You can also inspire creativity with STEM and robotics programs, or design cost-effective solutions that support teachers and tutors. So those are pretty wide. Within the economic opportunity realm, so you can help build community and family stability, increase access to college, build and rehabilitate affordable housing, provide financial literacy training, or connect people to jobs. So this one is also kind of broad and connected to others as well. Within the veterans and military families focus area, you are able to connect vets and their families to benefits and job resources, as well as educational options, and really creating a welcoming community that understands the value of their service. Within disaster services, kind of sounds like what it says it is. So this is a lot of folks who can be among the first to respond when disaster strikes, or really helping to rebuild those communities in the months following a disaster. So this can either help survivors in building houses, or really building organizations from the ground up. This one can look very different as well. For Healthy Futures, it's really focused around promoting health and wellness, combating the growing opioid crisis, and really bridging the gap between individuals and health services. And you're also able to tackle food insecurity within this focus area as well. So if that's, building gardens or harvesting food for local families, that is kind of in that focus area. And then the last one, environmental stewardship. This option really allows you to get outdoors and restore public lands or bring environmental stewardship to the classroom. It elevates the importance of conservation at the local, state, and national levels. So not all of the opportunities that Americorps has fit really neatly into these categories. I know that mine kind of fits into a couple of these. So hopefully this just kind of helps delineate the types of opportunities, but know that they don't all fall very neatly into these boxes. The service projects and tasks that we all just talked about, or that I just talked about, are as diverse as our members. And so members come from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different experiences and identities, and bring all of that with them, which also really improves, I think, a lot of folks' intercultural competency skills as well, especially going into maybe different communities that they don't have experience with anymore, or with at all. And so also a lot of people join for very different reasons. And so you'll hear a little bit more about why we each joined a little bit later, and that can kind of help help you figure out why you might want to join as well. So let's talk a little bit about how it works and how you can customize your Americorps experience. So I've talked a lot about how there are just multitudes of options. And I think for me at the beginning, it was kind of overwhelming because I just saw all these opportunities and didn't really know where to start. But so I think if you think about some of these things first and then go into the application process, that might be really helpful for you. So a couple of places that you all get to make some choices when you're looking at this. So you get to choose the length. So Americorps members typically serve between 10 and 12 month terms. But like I said, there are options offered for shorter terms or for the summer. You're also able to choose the location. So you can choose to be in your hometown or you can go somewhere completely new. You can really narrow down your search that way as well. You can also really search for organizations that match causes that you care about. So if any of those things that I was talking about within the focus areas really jumped out at you, you can search for those things and really narrow down your options that way as well. Once you do all of that, if selected, you'll serve with a partnering nonprofit organization or agency, so you'll match with that organization. And then you'll serve within the communities in this manner. In this way, it can really help, like I said, build those professional skills, earning money to support your education, and really discovering a new career field are many of the options that come with this. So I'm going to play us a quick video from Americorps to kind of just wrap all this information up nicely and review before we talk about the 3 branches.
So you have questions about Americorps? Well, you've come to the right place, because we're here to help. First off, let's clear up one thing right away. You might be wondering how to say or spell Americorps. Sometimes people pronounce the P, but don't make that same mistake. Americorps is alive and well, just spelled with a silent P. So think of Apple Core or Core of the Earth. Now that we have that clear, what exactly is Americorps anyways? Americorps is simply Americans of all ages and backgrounds dedicating their time and skills to get things done. There we go. So how does Americorps get things done? More than 80,000 Americans across the country join Americorps each year, and all of them are tackling different problems in different ways. For example, Americorps members help families attain affordable homes. They mentor students so that they stay in school. Perhaps there is a tornado, a flood, a forest fire, or a hurricane. Americorps members also help communities recover from disasters. There's so many more things that Americorps members do, but if we said it all, we'd be here all day. Why do we call them members, you ask? Americorps members spend anywhere from 3 months to a year dedicating their time and skills to serve. They can volunteer with nonprofits, schools, public agencies, and community and faith-based organizations. And in case you were wondering, there are a few perks Americorps members get, including money to pay for college, student loan deferment, training, living allowance, health benefits, and job opportunities with leading employers. Not too bad, right? All right. What's the purpose of Americorps? Like the military or the Peace Corps, Americorps is a way to serve your country. Americorps members make Americans safer, stronger, and healthier, and they strengthen our communities. But above all, Americorps members get things done. That's it. That's what Americorps is. Learn more about Americorps at americorps.gov.
Sorry that I showed you all yourselves for a second there. I'm like on 3 different screens and it's kind of a mess. Anyway, moving right along. I really appreciate the video because like I said, I think it wraps everything up pretty nicely. And it's very aesthetically pleasing, which I'm a fan of. So moving right along. So a couple of the things that I haven't mentioned yet that are within this infographic for you all to look at. So more than 1 million folks have served since 1994, which is a really big number. AmeriCorps leverages about $1 billion in outside resources every year. There are over 21,000 service locations across the country. There are nearly 450,000 vets and military families who are assisted through national service every year. And there's about $3 billion in scholarships that have been earned by members. So that's also pretty amazing. And lastly, serving as an Americorps member can really improve your employment opportunities. So 43% of Americorps members were employed 6 months before their service ended, which is a pretty good leeway. So there are a few branches of Americorps. So this is a lot of the reason that we wanted to put this info session on, is because it's a lot, there are a lot of opportunities, which I hope has been made clear thus far, but it also can be kind of confusing if you don't have the context for how it's set up. So I'm very visual, so hopefully this will help make sense to you all as well. But so if you imagine Americorps as the trunk of the tree and the branches that I'm about to talk about as the branches, all of the opportunities that are available are like all of the leaves. So it's all Americorps. Hopefully that helps make sense. But so Americorps State and National it's a network that makes up the majority of service opportunities that are available to you. So you can select from thousands of organizations that see service as a solution to those local, regional, and national challenges. So this one is really the most broad and has the least structure, because it can kind of, like, this is where they all kind of fall, or many of them fall. And this is actually what my experience falls under as well, so I can talk about that when we get to our panel later. Our next branch is Americorps NCCC. So NCCC members strengthen communities and develop leadership skills through direct team-based service. So this is, I think that's one of the biggest differences with NCCC, is that it's based in a team. So you can either be clearing trails for a national park or building homes for families in need, but you'll engage in a variety of projects, and you'll also live with your team of young adults from across the country. So like I said, that diverse team is made up of 18 to 24-year-olds. So that's also very specific about this opportunity as well. So in addition to engaging in that experience, you'll also still get all of that experience in your leadership skills and learning teamwork and really developing friendships and relationships in a very different and meaningful way. NCCC members also have the unique benefit of having housing provided. So you'll receive a modest living allowance, meals, and transportation in addition to that housing. But so you'll all be together within that team. After completing the training at an NCCC campus within your team, you and your team will be deployed to serve on a variety of short-term projects in communities throughout the U.S. So there was also an NCCC team when I was doing my Americorps term, and so they traveled around every 3 months, and so they changed to a different project every 3 months, and so they were just with us for that short time, and then before they went to their next spot. So I'm not sure if that is how every NCCC goes, but that's kind of the gist of it. Also want to point out that I think this opportunity is really great to consider if you know that you're the type of person that needs to be around people, especially if you're moving to a new place. It can be really, really nice to have kind of like a built-in friend structure. And so I know that this is, that Christina was an NCCC member, so she'll be able to provide a little bit more context there once we get to our panel. Within NCCC, there's also what's called Fema Corps. So Fema Corps allows you to get still that same team experience and like the adventure piece of NCCC, but with really intense professional development. So as a Fema Corps member, you'll serve under the direction of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So you can be conducting administrative tasks in an office setting. You can be going door to door, helping disaster survivors apply for assistance, or helping organizations to respond to disasters in different ways. So as a Fema Corps member, you'll also be provided housing similarly to NCCC. receive a living allowance, and be deployed with the team wherever the need is greatest. So that's kind of a caveat of that as well, that you'll be deployed wherever the need is greatest. So if a disaster strikes and you're in Boston and it strikes in Alabama, then like that's where you're going, which is kind of exciting if that's what excites you. Fema Corps also can help you really launch a career in federal government or pursue other career paths within emergency management. So if that's something that interests you, this is a really great opportunity for you. The third and last branch is Americorps Vista. So Vista members bring passion and perseverance where the need is greatest. So a lot of these organizations, or all of these organizations, work to fight poverty. And so they really serve as an agent of change in those communities. They live alongside community leaders that meet, most of our nation's most pressing issues. So they are really working alongside them to help advance those local solutions. So you'll serve in either a nonprofit or a local government agency where you'll gain experience and leadership skills that will really set you up for a life in service in the public or private sector. So again, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, Vista might be the best option as well. I think with this one especially too, you'll really gain a better understanding of the complexities of poverty within the United States. So you'll be able to use that creativity to address in your hometown or another location of your choice, those unique challenges that might be coming up as well. This can either look like fundraising, grant writing, volunteer recruitment, and so many more opportunities. And I believe Christina's other AmeriCorps term was as a Vista. So again, she'll provide great info on that once we get there. Last thing with AmeriCorps Vista, so upon completion of your service year, you'll earn non-competitive eligibility. So you'll earn a hiring status that fast tracks you in federal employment. So these are a few things to highlight, especially if you're looking to get into a few of these things that can be helpful to look at these more specific branches of AmeriCorps rather than just national and state. But national and state also, like we were talking about before, provide really great benefits as well as like during and after your service. Speaking of benefits, I want to share all of those with you. So like I mentioned a couple times, you'll receive a modest living allowance to cover your basic expenses during your service term. So I'm going to be very real with you. You're not going to make money being an AmeriCorps member, but hopefully that's not the reason you're really doing it anyway. But you do receive a living allowance. And I know for me, it was great. It was enough. But I think it also really depends on what city you're in and what your family situation is and all of those factors. You'll also earn a Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award. So this is offered to individuals who complete a term of service and can be used to pay for a range of educational expenses. So it can either be used for repaying qualified student loans or even future tuition payments. My AmeriCorps award was the only way that I was able to go to grad school. So it can either be used for past education or for future education. And you can earn up to 2 full Siegel Education Awards within multiple service terms. You also have the opportunity, if you're approved in approved AmeriCorps positions, you're eligible for forbearance for most federally guaranteed student loans. So this is also a really big thing for a lot of folks. In addition, interest payments that accrue during your service year may be eligible for repayment by AmeriCorps, which is pretty neat. And like I've said many times already, you'll really be able to jumpstart your career in a different way and really gain those transferable skills that employers are looking for, all that leadership and teamwork and problem solving and being able to communicate with other humans who aren't like you. So once you complete your service, you'll really be able to leverage the Employers of National Service Network, which can be really helpful. So that will connect you with hundreds of employers from the private, public, and nonprofit sectors who are committed to hiring alumni. So there's a very good connection there. And then also So you'll join, like I said, those million folks who've been in AmeriCorps since 1994. You'll join that network of like-minded leaders who are really passionate about improving communities. And so AmeriCorps alumni receive access to special benefits and resources. I know this is something I definitely need to look into a little bit more. But so, for example, many colleges and universities match the education award and offer additional AmeriCorps scholarships, which I did not know about when I was a student, and I wish I had, so now you know. Lastly, I promise I'm almost done talking at you. But so let's talk about the application process. So you will go on to myamericorps.gov and create a profile. And so you'll kind of research and make note of the listings that interest you, so you can really narrow them down based on the location or the passion area or whichever you want to do, and kind of look at them that way. And then you'll complete the AmeriCorps Common application. So some listings, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because there are just so many opportunities. Some listings will link directly to the organization and they'll have an external application, and some will just use the AmeriCorps Common application. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But so you'll submit your AmeriCorps Common application, and you're able to submit it to up to 10 listings that interest you. And then the organizations will reply to you if they're interested in your listing, and you'll kind of go upon the hiring process in the way that you normally would. They'll contact you if they're interested. They might do an interview, they might not. Again, this really varies with all of them. I think I had like a 20-minute phone interview with somebody I'd already met. So, but I know that some of them can also be pretty rigorous. So again, varies a lot. But so you'll be able to reach out to each organization or program for more information as you get to that process. But it would be really important to make sure that you understand how different each of them is, to make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do. And so a couple other questions that I think might come up for folks in this section. So how long is the application going to take you? So the ideal timeline, I'm sorry, I just skipped ahead in my notes. So how long is the application going to take you? So it's probably like doable to do it in under 2 hours. It's really, really helpful if you already have a current resume ready to go that you can upload. You'll upload all of that to the portal, and we'll talk a little bit about the portal in just a minute. And when should you apply? So the ideal timeline to apply is 4 to 6 months before your desired start date. So you'll find those application deadlines on each AmeriCorps listing. So again, because they are so different and because there are so many options within each opportunity, those listings are really going to vary. So I think the sooner you can start that, the better. So if you're a graduating senior looking at this as an option, it's a good time to get started. You can apply to multiple listings. So like I said, you can apply to 10 listings with your common application. But if any of the opportunities that you're interested in are an external application, they're like on top of that 10. So those are like extra that you get. So it's only 10 common application listings that you can apply to, and then plus the others that you might be interested in. Other things that you probably like to know, so the common application includes contact information, a motivational statement, list of your skills, resumes, and a list of references as well. So good to be thinking about ahead of time before you get started. If you have any questions concerning your application or about your options to serve, obviously you can always get in contact with one of us, and we're happy to help you. But there's also the National Service Hotline. So that number is 1-800-942-2677. And that's on a later slide if you'd like to copy that. And we will also say, as we've kind of talked over the past few months, that we all agree that the AmeriCorps portal is a bit clunky and not super user-friendly. So if you do need help navigating that, please let us know. We've done it and have also talked about, over the past ish years, like it hasn't changed. So we can help, and it also is a bit clunky. So like I said, happy to help. So I'm going to turn it over to Victoria for a couple minutes, and she's going to share about one of our opportunities in AmeriCorps that is housed right here at UO.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. I don't think I have control of the slides, so I'll have to just signal you.
Down.
Presto changeo. Yeah, so I am the program coordinator and also an alum of the program Resource Assistance for Rural Environments, or as we like to call it, RARE, because it's a lot less of a mouthful. But the RARE program is, amongst all of those different categories that Hannah was listing, we are a rural intermediary, which means that we build the capacity of rural communities. And it's sort of a win-win for both our members and our communities, because for our members, the AmeriCorps members who participate in the RARE program, they get professional development, they get personal growth, they get to, you know, serve the state or serve their community. And for the communities themselves, they get capacity or people power. For our rural communities here in Oregon, a lot of folks are probably familiar with brain drain, or just the idea that, you know, when folks grow up in rural communities, they might leave to go to college and they might not come back, or they just take off and live somewhere else, and there's not a whole lot of people power within these rural communities to tackle the problems that they want to tackle. And so our program matches those excited, enthusiastic people who want to change the world with rural communities who really need that people power, and we sort of marry those two interests. Next slide, please. I can get a little ahead of myself if I just start rolling down the chain. I mentioned that we are a capacity building program, and namely we are capacity building in that we help these rural communities address their economic goals, their social goals, and their environmental goals. And given the current global pandemic that we are in right now, the RARE program is really focused on helping the long-term recovery of the rural communities right here in Oregon. Our program is actually based out of the School of Planning, Public Policy, and Management within the Institute for Policy Research and Engagement, where we do disaster preparedness. And so there's a lot of work to be done within that, sort of like on a systems level. So how do cities respond to this? How do counties respond to this? How do we sort of support small businesses and economic growth, and, you know, make sure that the whole state doesn't collapse? Not to get too out of control about it. But within that, I did mention that our purpose is to increase the capacity of rural communities, and we do that by sending graduate level participants out to rural communities. And this doesn't mean that you need to have a graduate degree. This means that you do need to have a bachelor's in order to participate, which is unique amongst AmeriCorps programs. Most AmeriCorps programs don't have an educational requirement. Ours does. But this graduate level work means that the work that we are sending you out to do is graduate level, meaning that if you were to take on the same activities in an urban setting, it might take you 5 or 10 years before you got to take on the sorts of projects that our members get to do in the RARE program. For example, we have a member in the program this year who's down in the city of Brookings, the southernmost point on the Oregon coast, a hop, skip, and a jump over the California border. And he graduated from undergrad last spring of 2019, and he's currently writing the parks plan for the city of Brookings single-handedly, which is no small feat if you're familiar with writing a parks plan. He's essentially taking stock of what the parks are, what they look like, what the needs are in the community. He's interviewing various stakeholders, seeing what the community wants out of their parks. He's basically a one-person Leslie Knope for the city of Brookings, and he's writing the parks plan for their community, which should last for 5 or 10 years. And that's really exciting. So within this opportunity to sort of give back, make a difference within the state, we have been around for the entirety of Americorps' existence since 1994. So we've been around for 26 years. And within that time, you can see my little map here, we've made an impact on every county within the state, and the purple bubbles indicate how many members we've had in those locations. So you can see we've had lots of members in Pendleton, in the Dalles, we've had quite a few in Roseburg, lots in the Eugene area. And our members are serving in rural places, which for those who might not know the definition of rural, it's basically just small, like not cities. So places like Enterprise, which are way out in the Wallowas, count as rural. And that we would say that's a rural remote placement. But places like Coburg, which are 15 minutes up the road from Eugene, also count as rural because it's a small community and has needs for capacity building as well. Can I get the next slide, please? So to answer the question, sort of like, what do our Americorps members do? I mean, I think the tree of Americorps that Hannah was talking about is very vast, and the tree of, or I guess the branch of Rare Americorps within that is pretty broad as well. We are sort of operating on a systems level, so we're not doing so much direct service, like we're not going to be the person handing out food at a food bank, but we are going to be the ones thinking about food systems on a larger level and sort of identifying what the needs are within the community. So I put 4 examples here of folks who are, 3 of whom are currently in our program and 1 of whom is an alum, just to say sort of like what they do. Josias is down with Travel Southern Oregon, and he's working on tourism projects. So he's working with the tourism industry to broaden agritourism opportunities. So he's sort of both adding capacity to tourism and the agriculture community, giving opportunities to farmers to diversify their portfolios. Sarah Burkle is in the city of Cornelius, is one of the few cities in Oregon that is, the majority of citizens are not white. And so she's doing a lot of outreach to communities within Cornelius to have pop-up plazas or resource fairs, support small businesses and entrepreneurialism. A lot of that looks very different given the pandemic, but she's still building those business relationships between the city and the citizens. Eleanor Williams is with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and she is writing a food sovereignty assessment, so identifying First Nations foods and identifying what the landscape of food access looks like in that community, and sort of writing a recommendation for the Confederated Tribes to say, this is what it looks like, this is your snapshot, and this is where you know, the food system could be improved. And I put Dana Nichols on here because Dana is a rock star who came into the program with a graduate degree, and she worked with the Greater Bandon Association to do economic development with small businesses in downtown Bandon. And she is a success story as well. She has gone on from that to work with Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments in Albany, just up the road. We have lots of people who join us from other Americorps services, like Josias did a different Americorps service in New Mexico before he joined us. Sarah had spent 4 years sort of like not really sure what she wanted to do after she graduated college, and ultimately ended up with the RARE program. Eleanor is straight out of school at the U of O and jumped right into very rural and remote Eastern Oregon. But all of these people are having an impact and making a difference in rural Oregon. I think I have 1 more slide, or 2. Yes, okay, so just a little bit to highlight the differences, or I guess the RARE specifics. We really pride ourselves on the support that we provide to our members within the RARE program. We have a cohort model where we have 30 members across the state, and we really try and build camaraderie between those members, both from support from our program here on campus and within the community of RARE members. Because we are housed at the U of O, we do have extra perks, like 9 graduate credits to the U of O, as well as in-state tuition for anybody who's interested in continuing their studies in Oregon. We've got lots of connections to faculty and staff on campus, including you get to be considered a student worker. So you still have access to the library and ArcGIS and JSTOR, which is fun. But most importantly, we have 500 alumni across the state who are now, having been in the state for 26 years, in some really important positions. And when you step into the rare community, or the rare family, as we like to say, you step into an amazing network of people who are doing great things and want to help you succeed. So I think I will leave it at that. I will say that our application process is, it is separate and different from the My Americorps portal. So if you want to apply to the RARE program, you do have to go to our website, which is rare.uoregon.edu. And we have an online application, and then you email us your resume and 5 essay questions, and the deadline is next Friday. I think that is all for that. Might have one fun picture of, yep, this is a picture of our current cohort on the left, and then a striking photo of our member Jeff from last year's cohort wearing our Rural and Proud t-shirt.
Love that. Well, thank you, Victoria. So we are gonna go on to our panel portion, so that we're gonna share a little bit more about our experiences. So we're each gonna take just a few minutes to do that, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion that I promised. So Victoria is actually gonna keep us going.
Ooh. Can you change the slide, please? I could just start talking about my RARE experience. There we go. So yes, I am the program coordinator for the RARE program, but I did serve as a RARE in 2015. And prior to that, I served in a different Americorps program, which was Oregon State Service Corps, which actually no longer exists. But that's neither here nor there. I went to Willamette University in Salem and really fell in love with the Marion Polk Food Share. I thought they did an amazing job addressing not only immediate food security needs, but also thinking about food systems and trying to address the root causes of hunger. And as somebody who was really interested in agriculture and food systems, I wanted to jump into that. And so I got into Americorps because I specifically wanted to work for the Marion Polk Food Share. And I was really invested in my Salem community. I really wanted to get that food systems experience. And I also, I felt the desire to serve the greater community of Marion and Polk County. So my first year as an Americorps was actually with a state and national organization. I was a children's garden educator where I ran around to 3 different school sites, and I taught kids how to garden, explained how worms worked, sang goopy songs. I tried to explain to the kids that I was Miss Frizzle, but they were too young to understand that reference. And in general, I just got to be my inner kid by painting silly signs and making silly crafts and just doing all sorts of really fun things. I did at some point host like an important conference for other garden educators, but it was just a lot of fun. My picture there on the bottom left is me when I was much tanner and had less hair. When we planted shopping cart gardens where we put burlap sacks and then planted into the shopping carts, just to prove that you can garden anywhere and that doesn't require a whole lot of space or backyard or whatever. You can garden with what you have. So following that term of service, I learned about the RARE program because the other woman in that photo is actually, she was serving as a RARE at the Marion Polk Food Share. And I, at that point, had a lot of experience on farms and at farmers markets and grocery stores, and really wanted to have that opportunity to take a step back and look at the food system from one step removed. And so I got invested in the RARE program and served with the Southwestern Oregon Food Systems Collaborative in 2015. where I thought I knew quite a bit about land-based agriculture and then decided to learn about the fishing industry. So I went down to the south coast of Oregon and was working with the folks down there to identify challenges within getting fish from the Pacific Ocean to the restaurants and grocery stores of the South Coast, and got to get connected to just the movers and shakers in Oregon who are the food systems players, like Oregon Food Bank and rural development initiatives, and sort of like figure out what that landscape looks like. That's all. Well, it's not all, but I could just keep talking, so I'll stop.
Sorry, I'm like having trouble toggling back and forth to like unmute myself, but also change the slide. So appreciate your patience. I'm working on it, but Kate, you are up.
Kate, you're on mute.
Okay, as many Zoom meetings as I've done, it's actually the first time I've done that, so I'll take it. I'm Kate. I served with City Year in Chicago. So at this point, there's over, I believe, 24 or 25 different places that you can do City Year. And as Hannah mentioned, there are some programs that have their own application, even similar to what Victoria mentioned with RARE. City Year is one of those programs that has its own application. So you just go to cityyear, CITYYEAR.org. And they do like a rolling application. They have certain times of the year. Pretty standard. You have a greater chance of getting into a specific site. So you can apply to like Chicago, you can apply to Jacksonville, Florida, or there's again lots of different places you can apply to. But you're more likely to get your preference if you the earlier that you apply. Additionally, you can also say wherever's most needed. So that's also fine there too. It's a 10-month commitment. So I did 2 10-month terms, one from 2010 to 2011 and one from 2011 to 2012 in Chicago. I had never been to Chicago. I'm originally from Atlanta, and I went to school at Appalachian State in Western North Carolina, and was like, I want to give back. I feel really called to do something different and move to a new place to, be able to do that. My first 10-month commitment, I was what's called a core member, and that is what the majority of folks that do this are. You can see in the bottom picture with the Chicago Bean. It's the Cloud Gate, but we call it the Bean in Chicago. Those were the folks that I got to serve with. There were about 200 of us, so it was a pretty large group. We're split into teams of anywhere from like 8 to 10 and assigned to different schools throughout the South and West Side Chicago communities. So I was a core member my first year. I was volunteering in a 9th grade classroom in a school in the Inglewood community of Chicago. So doing tutoring and mentoring was not, a lot of times we get questions like, oh, so is this like TFA, like Teach for America? And my answer there is no. Like, it's very different in the sense that you're not the main one teaching in the classroom. You're providing the extra support for students. So helping the teacher out with, if there's students that are particularly struggling or need someone to talk to, you can like pull a student out of class and like have a one-on-one session. And even just being an additional, eyes and ears in the classroom. We also did after-school programming. So my friend and I my fellow core member and I set up a service learning program where we focused on more like environmental issues. So we, then like around the community, we planted some trees and did a few things. We also had one that focused on Taekwondo. It was just, each school and your team kind of helped develop some of those after-school programs based on zero budget and what different skills you could teach. Yeah, so that's pretty much my first year. My second year, I was a part of what was called the Civic Engagement Team, and I was a project lead on that team. And so it was a group of 5 of us, and we went around to different communities within Chicago, primarily South and West Side communities, and we actually helped plan large-scale service events. So we did, where you can kind of see us taping up different murals. You can see some of the book murals that we did for a service project there. And essentially, helping engage community and corporate volunteers. So it was a way to bring additional funds into the organization, because we would charge corporations money to put on these service days, and basically, give free murals and benches. I got really good with using a saw I actually just painted my guest room this past weekend and was like, wow, I definitely know how to tape and tarp a space pretty well still. So definitely reusable skills, transferable skills, if you will, into different things like adulting. So there you go. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I would say that it's been one of the most important experiences I've had in my life. I think the biggest thing that I learned from it was, in addition to challenging my own power and privilege, it gave me a further insight into the inequities that exist in the United States, especially when it comes to the public school system. I think that one thing I took away from it is that it's really not okay that your zip code defines your quality of education. And that is very much what is the case, especially in Chicago. So Chicago is a great microcosm for some of the issues that exist in the public education system in the United States. And so I think that taught me a lot there. And I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, so it did help with providing funding to do so. One other thing that City Year offers is they have some different partnerships with universities across the country. They have what's called their Give a Year partnership. And there are certain programs at certain schools that will actually give you discounts on tuition or even help match some of that award if you apply and say that you did City Year. So that's another added bonus. They have some of those partnerships that they've strategically kind of set up. So yep, that's me. And then there's that picture down there is myself and a student, Demetrius, that I worked with. He is now he's not little anymore, and I actually went back to Chicago to see him graduate from high school. So, yeah.
In case anybody is interested, the next deadline for City Year is this Friday, which is very soon. But like Kate said, they have multiple deadlines. So if that feels fairly overwhelming, just wait till the next one. And then I'm going to throw it to Christina.
Awesome. So unfortunately, as you can see it, my slides are really text heavy. I did 2 really different types of programs. So I don't have any photos, but I did share my photo before this started with the team of me and my firefighting gear, because while I was in the National Civilian Community Corps, I was actually on what's called a burn team, meaning that we got to get our red cards and do controlled burns. So the National Civilian Community Corps, obviously I did this 15 years ago, so you can all tell my age. It's been a while. But it's changed a little bit since I was in it. Shortly after I completed my service year, I was placed in the southeastern region, and our base was in an old Navy base in North Charleston, South Carolina. They actually reorged after Hurricane Katrina because the structure of the National Civilian Community Corps changed so much, and also because of the addition of Fema Corps. So that campus no longer exists. There are 4 campuses that you can apply to join. Flexibility is key. It's kind of like City Year. You can put down where you want to go, but you also might end up someplace that you didn't think you were going to go. So I had no intention of ever moving to the Deep South. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And when I got the placement for the Southeast region, I think I had a lot of preconceived notions about what I was going to find in the Deep South. My experience, probably a lot like what others have said, like completely shattered my understanding of the United States as a country, who lives there. And also it was kind of the beginning into my kind of uncovering of just the cycles of poverty that exist and kind of how vicious they are and how hard it is to get out in a lot of places. So I had projects. Hannah was talking about working with NCCC teams. My experience was that our shortest project was 3 weeks in Georgetown, South Carolina, working with Habitat for Humanity. And my longest project was actually 2 months, so 8 weeks in the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. So I had projects, basically the first month of the NCCC, we called it AmeriSchool. You basically go to Americorps school where you spend 5 or 6 days a week learning about Americorps, the different programs, doing a lot of understanding of your own privilege, because you're going to be walking in the communities, lots of different communities where you will be very, very different from the people that you're working with. And that can be race, it can be class, it can be religious, it can just be rural versus urban. So a lot of what we spent that first month was kind of getting to know ourselves a little bit better, but also getting to know our team, because the NCCC is a team-based program. So during my year, we had projects in Habitat for Humanity with the Nature Conservancy down in the Florida Keys. We worked with the Jackson Public School Systems and the Jackson YMCAs in Jackson, Mississippi. Obviously, I just said the Okefenokee, which I learned after I got there. It is a swamp that is larger than the state of Delaware in Georgia, and shockingly beautiful. And then I also worked with a faith-based organization called CFAT in Alabama, where we were working to do educational content development for some programming that they had. My program year was 10 months. We did 1,700 hours of direct service over those 10 months. And during that time, we built houses, did invasive exotic species removal. We did tutoring and after-school programming, trail cutting, tree planting, controlled burns, and then that educational content. And the original reason that I did the National Civilian Community Corps, I had actually planned to do Peace Corps after college, but just kind of had a moment where I realized that I didn't know really very much about my own country. I hadn't really ever left where I was, and I think this experience really taught me that while I thought I was very worldly and traveled before I did this, Pittsburgh, where I grew up, the community I was in was a bubble. And it really, really pushed me outside of it. So initially it was my foray into like really getting to know my own country before I went and joined the Peace Corps. So I actually had applied to the Peace Corps and had a placement pending when Hurricane Katrina hit. Seeing the photos of Hurricane Katrina, my last project was in Abita Springs, Louisiana, when I was in the National Civilian Community Corps. And I ended up delaying and ultimately not participating in my Peace Corps placement. In exchange, I ended up going to the Gulf Coast of the United States through a program called Vista. Vista was really, really different from my NCCC year. I actually started out with a program in Alabama. The program, this is a really, really rare case. Americorps as a rule, generally doesn't let you transfer programs, but the program I was in, because it had started so quickly after Katrina, it kind of fell apart a couple months after I got there, and I had requested a transfer at that point to a new program that when I called and interviewed, I really liked the structure of it, and that was with the Tulane University Center for Public Service. And I moved to New Orleans in 2006. When I got to the Center for Public Service, we were tasked with two objectives. One of them was we were supposed to be identifying opportunities for meaningful servicing projects for Tulane University students. After Hurricane Katrina, the university decided to implement it was a mandatory public service. So all students had to do 2 semesters of service learning coursework. And while one of the things that happened was they realized that in order to do that, they were going to need help rebuilding these nonprofits across the city. That the nonprofits, just the structure of the nonprofits had been shattered by Katrina. So we were basically embedded to do like the logical capacity, in some cases building, and in some cases rebuilding programming. My placement was with Catholic Charities with the Adult Education English as a Second Language civics program. So when I got there, there were about 90 students who participated in 2 sites in that program. And there were a very small handful of volunteers that we worked with who were teaching those 90 students. By the time I left, and I actually ended up, again, I turned down my Peace Corps placement after my Americorps year was done because I really ended up falling in love with this job in the city and just kind of the mission of everything. And I ended up working for Catholic Charities as the English language civics coordinator for 3 years until I went to graduate school. By the time I left, we had approximately 200 service learning placements for Tulane University students. We had 6 sites and over 800 students that we were working with each year. So I don't remember who it was, maybe Hannah, maybe Victoria, just talking about capacity building. That was a huge part of what we did, was kind of building the structure so that when we left, one of the ultimate goals of Vista is usually there is like a 3-year grant cycle. So usually a program doesn't have a Vista for more than a handful of years. The idea is that you go in there and you try to work yourself out of a job to try to build a capacity so that the organization can survive without being there. So happy to report that that program no longer has a Vista.
Christina,
Yeah.
can I interrupt you for just a minute?
Sure thing.
I just want to acknowledge that we're at 4 o'clock, and I know that folks
I'm
might
sorry.
have like Zoom classes or something that they need to get to. So we will come back to Christina, and then I'll throw my story in really quickly. But in case folks need to leave, I'm going to forward our slides to our emails. If you have specific questions, like please feel free to email all of us, one of us, whomever. And if you just want to like take a photo of that really quickly, and then if you need to leave, please feel free to leave. You're not going to hurt our feelings. And then, like I said, we'll go back, and if you're able to stay for a few more minutes, we will wrap up and try to get to our Q&As in just a couple minutes. So take your pictures, and I'm going to go back. Okay, great.
I'm actually throwing that out there. That was actually the end of my spiel. So that was.
Sorry for cutting you off. Oh, I went to the wrong slide. Okay. Are you sure there's nothing else you wanted to add? Okay,
No, that was it. Mhm.
Okay, well, I will just give my story really quickly. So I did a quarter term over the summer 2015, as well as a full 11-month term in 2015 and 2016, also in New Orleans. I think it's really interesting, especially right next to Christina's experience. Like, we were in the same place. And New Orleans is actually a much smaller city than a lot of people think, but we had very different experiences. So I worked with Project Homecoming. So I was a construction worksite manager, and I managed rebuilding homes. And so I was leading groups of volunteers who were carpenters and were from, church youth groups and all this kind of stuff, but also people who were 12 and had never touched a hammer. So it was a very large array of experiences. But so how I got into that, I was really involved with the alternative breaks program in undergrad. And so I'd actually volunteered with Project Homecoming multiple times while I was still in undergrad. The first time I went down there, I felt so connected to the people there. And I know that probably everybody who has lived there will say this, but New Orleans just has a spirit about it that it's so hard to explain unless you have lived there and gotten really connected to the intergenerational communities that create the culture there. And it really sucks you in. But so I loved that, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And I also really loved the work that the Americorps team was doing during while I was there for my breaks. And I was totally that girl at the end of the week that I was like, hi, I want to be you, please tell me how. And then I did. So I did the external application and applied and moved down there a week after I graduated from college. And so I'll just say the last couple things. So one of the biggest challenges for me was I would go to my construction site in the morning. My manager would come and teach me how to do something. So, build a deck for an HVAC unit. There's a lot of math involved in that. And then 20 minutes later, I would have to teach 12-year-olds how to do it. So it was very challenging, and it really pushed me. I mean, a lot of times I was, in the closet YouTubing it so that then I could go out and be like, okay, so this is how we do this, very confidently. Which I will say, I think that has made me incredibly good on my toes. And I think that's probably the best professional skill that I gained during my Americorps terms was that I am really good in crisis. I'm really good in chaos. I get called on a lot in my job now to step up in terms of when chaotic things are happening, like this pandemic. But so a lot of those things that I really gained and give back to my Americorps experience. But yeah, so absolutely loved it. Would be happy to share more later. But yeah, so I'm gonna move on. I think Sean is here still. So Sean, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But if not, thanks.
I'm still here. I have a question actually about the RARE program specifically. So I know, I think a couple of you mentioned like encountering weird environments when going from like a rural place to or a urban place to a rural place, or from like a white community to a Black community, and that's often the case with Americorps or programs like RARE. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and how that works with RARE. I know, like, just in my head thinking about the process, like going to a rural community, I wonder if I would receive like backlash or that kind of thing, just because I'm from Portland and it's a very urban, liberal environment and that sort of thing.
Well, I will say we do have plenty of members from Portland and other urban centers, and they survive. No, but I mean, rural Oregon, as you probably know, is predominantly white and predominantly low income in a lot of places. And so a lot of the diversity and difference there is a lot of the socioeconomic differences. And so members who are placed out there, we've never had any problems with folks like with racial discrimination or anything like that. But it is a totally eye-opening experience in terms of like how these rural communities that are natural resource dependent have fared in the wake of industrialization. So the RARE program was actually founded after the spotted owl legislation that revolutionized the timber industry in Oregon. And a lot of the rural communities in Oregon that were dependent upon natural resource extraction then had no income and no way to sort of sustain their communities, be it the timber mill communities or the port communities that were shipping timber out. And so that's a very real challenge within a lot of the rural communities that we work in, and a lot of the challenges that folks face. There are some other differences that are, noteworthy. A lot of our rural communities don't have broadband or internet. And so like going from an urban center out to rural Oregon, it's like, oh, there's just like, it's not a guarantee that you're going to have internet in any given location. And your gas stations might close at 8 p.m. and you'll get stranded on the highway. During my own service year, I can't tell you how many times my supervisor like didn't show up for a meeting in the morning because she was like, oh, we were on 101 and ran out of gas after 8 p.m. So there's like lots of funny little funny things to incorporate into your mind in terms of like working within these rural communities that are challenges that are not necessarily the same challenges that face urban communities that are also, urban communities that are low income have different challenges than their rural counterparts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. My only other big concern is I was wondering if RARE or any of the other Americorps programs anticipates like big changes for the like, I guess, incoming class or incoming group of volunteers in light of COVID-19 and what that would look like.
Yeah, so we have, just for the RARE program, we're still going full on, and a lot of the challenges that we're seeing are, some of the changes is just like a focus on economic recovery. And so how do you set these businesses or set communities up for success? How do you support small businesses? How do you ensure that these communities are going to be financially solvent into the future? So a lot of long-term planning, a lot less of a focus on things like tourism. However, we have seen some really positive things nationally. In the CARES Act that was passed a couple weeks ago, they did include support for the Siegel Education Award, so guaranteeing the Siegel Award for current members who cannot complete their term of service, and also guaranteeing the federal match for communities, so basically guaranteeing that the federal government is going to pay their portion of the Americorps bill, which is all really good. And I think that our partners at the national level are very supportive of the Americorps program and realize that like this is how we're going to get ourselves out of this, is by this volunteer corps who's committed to service.
And I think especially after something like this, like, Christina and I both have a lot of like experience and knowledge around Hurricane Katrina, and a lot of AmeriCorps programs grew out of that disaster. And I think, I mean, I would imagine that the same thing will happen with COVID, that there will be a lot more opportunities that open up. And quite frankly, I really think that the federal government will rely a lot more on AmeriCorps members because we do good work for cheap.
Yes.
Actually,
I wasn't
I
going to
was
say that. Yeah.
I mean, that was part of what happened after Hurricane Katrina, that when you saw the federal dollar, like the amount that was being spent, AmeriCorps programs got the inside numbers of like how much of that money that was AmeriCorps groups that was being leveraged, and that's why NCCC changed so much, and that's the Fema Corps came out of that. So I think something, I absolutely, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but there's a part of me that's like, I wonder what the next iteration of AmeriCorps is going to be post-COVID, because I think that the idea of having like public health response and more financial literacy and these types of things are absolutely they're going to be dependent on AmeriCorps members to do that type of labor.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Well, Sean, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're happy to keep talking. Like I said, if you have any questions that come up later, feel free to email any one of us or all of us together, and we can help point you in the right direction if we don't know the answer. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. And we hope to chat with you soon.
Yeah, of course. Have a good day.
You too. Bye, y'all.
Thanks.
Done!
We did it!
Jasmine?